this is Kyle, and that's right. You are back watching Knockouts and Three Counts, and we've got a great episode for you tonight. If you've been checking us out on social media, like you should be, at KO3C Pod on Instagram and Twitter, or Knockouts and Three Counts on YouTube, you've seen all of our promo for tonight's guest. Corey, throw out your social media real quick so we can get to our guest.
As always, real quick, Fight Fan 313. Only thing I use is Twitter. Let's get to it.
All right, and without any further ado, we've got the return, but this time, the first time for a solo interview for Aaron Orion. How you doing, brother man?
Good. How are you guys?
Hey, not too bad, man. Just trying to live through this pandemic bullshit like everybody else.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I feel that.
Long hot Monday on my end, man. I dealt with a flat tire already today. I had whoever tightened the lugs before used a air wrench, so everything was over tightened like hell. Couldn't break it with the 4-way. Had to break out the torches. One of them fun days. End up working overtime just because I have to fix a tire on the company truck, you know.
You gotta love that, don't you? Well, throw out your social media, brother man. Let them know where they can find you.
On Instagram, it's going to be at DT Aaron Orion. Twitter is just at Aaron Orion. And then Facebook is facebook.com/Aaron Orion. And then we also have Instagram, and everything else for Death Threat related stuff is just at Death Threat Army.
So let's talk about that first. So as we mentioned, before we went on live, Corey usually is with us for more of the UFC stuff, but I sent him all your stuff leading into this so that he could get a little bit more familiar. And the first thing that jumped out that he called me about was the Death Threat Army. Now, as I mentioned, the first time we had him on the show, it was with the whole Death Threat Army at BCWA, which you can find that episode at all of our archives on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, all that stuff. So this first time we've had you on by yourself, can you tell us a little bit about the Death Threat Army? And Corey, give him your question yourself. I'll let you word it.
Well, you kind of had started to ask it. I mean, like, what was the origins of it? I mean, Kyle had basically, started to explain it to me in smaller detail. Essentially, you guys are a group of military guys that kind of, found each other outside of the service, but in a different
wrestling, not outside the service, but you got it.
Yes, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, so originally we were just Death Threat, and it was myself and Jamie Hall, and we met at a wrestling show while we were both stationed in Fort Stewart, Georgia. So I didn't know he was in the military. He didn't know I was in the military. We just met at a show, and we started talking, and that eventually led to finding out he was a medic in the Army, and then he was stationed maybe, 4 blocks away from my unit. And then we became best of friends, and then we started going to shows together. Then that led to us tagging and trying to come up with a name, trying to come up with what we were doing. Then we came up with Death Threat. And eventually, just because we were in the Army, people just started calling us the Death Threat Army, and then DTA, which, already had its own little, don't trust anybody. So the DTA thing already kind of had a thing going. And we were like, okay, it always has word familiarity when you see the initial. So it's we like that. So we just kind of ran with it. And then when I left the military, Jamie stayed, and I came home, where then I met the guys that now everyone in Michigan knows as Death Threat Army, like Jack Price, Alex Weir, Adam Wick. And then it became, for Jack Price and I, it became more of a hey, we might be closer to we're still trying to get our licks in with the business or whatever, but we wanted to especially for me, I was like, man, we might be close to being done, because especially at the time, you're like, man, I was almost 30 years old, and I was like, man, maybe this was it. So maybe I just want to give out my the knowledge I have or that I've gained, and I want to give it to the young guys, which is where Adam and Alex came in. And then Tommy Vendetta, and then Karam for the couple of years he was with us, but then as we established the team and as we established the faction, the family, we just all blew up on a different scale. Excuse me, because I think people just identified with what we were doing, and then identified with our friendship, our family that we have built, and then they also, we try to foster really great wrestling. So as we kind of hit on a couple of different cylinders that people enjoyed.
So Corey, that gives you your answer for that. And that leads me to a great question. So you mentioned the names that most people associate with Death Threat Army these days, like Adam Wick, you got Alex Weir, you've got, all these guys that we've seen around BCWA and the other, Michigan indies, and even up to Super Kicked in Toronto and everywhere else. So my question is, you guys are one of the most unique groups you'll ever see on the indies, for the simple fact that when you show up and see Death Threat Army on the card, that doesn't always mean that they're going to be fighting somebody else. A lot of times I've seen you guys end up fighting against each other too. So tell me a little bit about that dynamic, because it's almost like it gives you guys that stronger bond, but that's unique to a group setting.
Well, I think it's, and this is like patting ourselves on the back, like toot our own horn, but there's so many of us and a lot of us, especially now that like Tommy and Adam are more seasoned. They're like 2 years in. They're just great wrestlers as it is. Like without Death Threat Army, you want those guys. Like no one's bringing in. They might have gave Adam a shot based on him being represented by DTA. They might have gave Tommy a shot based on DTA. But now you want Tommy on your show no matter what. You want Adam on your show no matter what. You want Alex on your show no matter what. The DTA name maybe help open a couple doors for them, but now you just want them on the show because you know that they're going to give a good performance, and it's almost just that's just what we like. It's like the standards and practices we live by. Like it's our creed, is give everything you have. And what ends up happening is that you end up having 3, 4, 5 guys on the show that is Death Threat related, especially in the past year. Like Isaiah Bronner's been with us a lot more, where before he was almost just, it was just like Jack and I believed in him and we wanted him to, like come to us for guidance, and we liked what he did. We liked the fact that he was just beating people's asses, and we were like, man, dude, like we want you to be with us. We want you to represent our brand that we want to build. And for the past year, he's really been spending a lot more time with us. So then that's another member on a lot of shows. So then it ends up being like, hey guys, we want you guys all on the show, but we can't have you guys in 100 matches. So then we end up getting paired against each other, or paired in matches that we are having to square off with each other, which brings me to like the second part of the question of like, for us, wrestling is competition. And it's the same as if you were going to play basketball against your friends, you're going to play a football game, a pickup game, you're going to do jiu-jitsu. I don't have to hate your guts to have to wrestle against you. I don't have to have some sort of like weird fictitious grudge against you to be in a match with you. I want to put on a good wrestling match. And if that in this brotherhood, we understand that, hey, like we're going to get in the ring and we're going to give everything we have. And what makes these matches, I think, I would say they're even better, is that we know each other so well. So you're not going to see someone feeling each other out, because we don't need to feel each other out. So you're going to hit 0 to 100 relatively quick. And then it does bring us closer, because I love hitting my friends and I love hitting them hard. And I would probably hit them harder than I would hit anyone else, because like, it's like you want to like show your dominance, but you also like, there's been times where I've hit Jack with like a clothesline and I hit him so hard that he backflipped through. We're both laying on the ground, tired as we could be. And I just giggled to myself to say like, damn, that's messed up. Like, and he's letting me, he's folded over, and then he looks at me and he's like, son of a bitch. And then I crawl over for that tag or for the pin, and I try to pin the shit out of him, and he kicks out or whatever. And it's one of those things that, unless you're in some sort of combat sport with your friends, like you don't really understand. And the best way I can equate it is just like, is a basketball game. And if you're a super competitive person, you're going as hard as you can. You don't care about fouling your friend. You don't care about checking him into the boards. You don't care about any of that. You just want to win the match. And you also want to show your friends like, hey, this is me. Like, this is what I'm better. And then that friendly competition is what breeds, I think, the excellence that DTA brings to the shows.
So that brings I can add a little bit to what you were saying, as far as for those who haven't done like a combat sport or a jiu-jitsu type thing, where you don't understand that, yeah, we can beat the shit out of each other, but it doesn't mean I hate you.
Right.
And here's how I can relate. So a guy you and I both know real well, Superstar Bill Martell, I found out after one of the last BCWA shows, before all this shit happened, that he and I actually fought on the same card in our first fight. I was 13. He was old. He was older than me, but we fought on the same card behind Gigi's in Detroit, next door to it, in a parking lot in the middle of Detroit. And the reason I bring up that story is A, because it had Martel in it, but B, for me, man, I'll never forget it. It was funny. Like before we went to fight, it was the funniest thing in the world. Like, and this will show why I think you and I have talked about this before, Corey. Why jiu-jitsu I think is such a great thing. I was trying to find things that this kid did that pissed me off, just to get me pissed off to go fight him. I quickly realized that after about the first round, that gets you tired a lot quicker because you're trying to take his fucking head off.
Right.
To where fast forward to the last time I got to compete, which was 3 years ago, Devin actually got to be there. I competed it. It was my first time competing as a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. And it's funny, like he was like, dude, you were like chill, you didn't talk, you didn't nothing. I said, dude, it's hard to explain. It's just different, dude. I kind of just had to, you kind of got to get in your own. Everybody's got a different way of getting themselves ready for it. For me, I just kind of bounce around with music. But to go with what you were saying, it's just a totally different thing than like football and baseball and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You definitely don't have to hit your opponent. That's for sure.
Well, my question for you with that is, I didn't know much about your MMA. Do you have any MMA background, jiu-jitsu background? Obviously with the Army, I know what it is, but is it all like Army combatives, or did you get to train like straight jiu-jitsu much? Or
it was so it started as I did a very small amount of jiu-jitsu before I was in the Army. And that stemmed from like when I was like 16. It was like when I first got my first girlfriend. I thought I was like such a badass, right? Because I'm this like wrestler, but I'm also like a fat stooge, and I'm running around and I have like a bowl cut. And I think I'm just like this, like I'm such a badass. And some kid was like, and I'm a kid too, so I'm not disparaging him by calling him a kid. Some kid was like talking to my girlfriend and just talking to him like a normal conversation in the hallways. And I'm just like this 16-year-old, like jealous kid. And I started talking shit to him, and he's like, well, I'm going to come over your house and I'm going to beat your fucking ass. I was like, oh, bring it, man. And sure enough, he comes over and he beats my ass. He beats my ass right in my park, right in my driveway. And from that moment, I was like, dude, like, if I'm going to have that, like persona, if I want to talk that shit, like I got to know better. And so I took jiu-jitsu for a while when I was younger, and then as money faded out, as I had the money, I would do it. But most of the time, I didn't have the money until I joined the military. And then in the military, you have to do combatives. Level 1, that's the only thing you have to do. And then you might get sent to level 2, maybe. It's not mandatory, but you might get sent to level 2. But if you're passionate about it, you can go to level 3. And if you're very passionate about it and you stay around long enough, you can go to level 4. And like, I won't go into semantics of it, but basically like level 1 is like the basic hand-to-hand combat you would need to survive if somebody attacked you. And it's just keeping yourself alive. And it's not a lot of striking. It's mostly just like having the ability to defend yourself more than it is to attack somebody. And then level 2 is a lot more striking and a lot more weapon defense and stuff like that. And then level 3 is like full hand-to-hand combat. And then that's where you do like tournaments and stuff like for like, the Army. And then that's where like one of my biggest mentors in my life, his name's Justin Vance. He's I'm going to say he's a first sergeant, but I actually think he just got promoted very, very recently, or he's at least going right now to Sergeant Major Academy. And he came into our unit as a purple belt, and he basically just did like a full reform of like our unit, and he demanded that everyone knew jiu-jitsu. And he demanded that, and then we built a team, which it was called C3, the Chosen Combative, because we were the Chosen Guns, because we were artillery. And so we became the Chosen Combatives Club. And there was about 6 of us that we started doing jiu-jitsu 3 times a week. And then we also did it for PT 1 time a week. So after work, we do it 3 times. And then 1 time for PT, we did it with the entire platoon. And then that led to us going on trips and going to like Naga and going to Copa and doing all the no-gi tournaments. And then we eventually went and we did 2 tournaments in Florida and then 1 tournament in South Carolina. and then we did the it's called Marn Week, which is basically like Spirit Week for the military, where it's just like unit versus unit and all these different things: flag football, basketball, track, everything. Just like basically just everything that we do. And we competed for our to represent our unit, and between all that, I think I walked away. I can't see them, but I think I have like 3 gold medals and 2 silver medals from doing the Naga and the Copa tournaments. And then our unit won for the Marn Week too. We got first place. And then that took us to being like, I was the instructor for, I was the assistant instructor for our unit as I was leaving the Army. And then post that I haven't done a lot since I've been out. So I would say like I don't know, probably like roughly like 4 or 5 years of experience doing it. And then just maybe between 5 and 8 tournaments that we've been in.
I love it. So that you're the perfect person to ask a question that Corey's asked me for years. Corey, go ahead and ask, the question that you were asking me about as far as the beating that you take in wrestling versus a fight, now that you know that he's trained and things like that, because you've asked me that a couple times. Who better to ask than a wrestler?
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely true, and especially somebody who's more on the indie scene, like you were saying earlier. How does obviously I'm sure you've been asked it a million times, so I'll try to at least word it in a different way so it's not the exact same question. But how do the injuries stack up compared to a regular fight, or like you were saying, a no-gi tournament or something like that? Because I mean, people try to take limbs home on that kind of stuff. I mean, that stuff's no joke.
Yeah,
I would like. I would say go ahead, because for me, like I've never been like severely injured in wrestling. Like knock on wood. I've had obviously being very banged up, very bruised, very sore. Like that stuff I've had. I've rolled a couple ankles. I've separated my shoulder. I would say that's the worst of the worst. That I've had in wrestling, which I would equate to just good training, and then also like the fundamentals of wrestling. And in jiu-jitsu and all the tournaments we've been in, it's about it's like your ego. Your ego is what will get you in trouble.
Right.
Yeah,
like you have to know when to give up and when you can't get out. And for me, my platoon sergeant, Smoke Vance, the guy I was talking about earlier, he was probably 5'8" and maybe like 170 pounds, and I was 215. I was the fucking GI Joe. Like that's what they literally like referred to me as. Like I was the soldier of soldiers, and he would beat my ass every which way to Sunday. And I thought, going into it, the first couple of times you grab, I was like, oh, I can beat this dude. I'm so much bigger than him. I'm so much better than him. Like, or not better. But I was like, man, I'm so much bigger and stronger. I know I can beat him. And not one time ever in our entire 3 years of being together did I ever beat him or even come close, because he was so much more knowledgeable. So in those times, I learned. And especially we had a lieutenant, and she was maybe 100 pounds, maybe 110 pounds, and she was also a relatively high up jiu-jitsu practitioner as well. And I could beat her because there was so much of a strength difference, but she could hold her own for a very long time, and most of the time she could pull it out over me. So early on in my like jiu-jitsu and in my combative training, I learned very, very quick that like your ego is going to be what's going to get you in trouble, and your ego is what's going to get your limbs jacked up. It's going to get like hyperextensions, dislocations, stuff like that. And by the time that we get to the tournaments, I knew when to tap, and like I knew that I can't push it any farther. I know, so like I was like I got. Just like what comes to mind is like I got armbarred to a finish once, and I always lived like that. Like I could have beat that. I could have, if I would have just held on, I could have went the timer and hope that he just didn't shred my arm like Frank Mir or something like that. Like I could have hoped for that. But when you're being realistic, and like I said, if you have your ego in check, you know that like it's the same for wrestling. You want to have 100 other matches. So you can't die on this one unless you're in like a situation where you're making, $1 million, $100,000, even $10,000 for a fight. Like this was just us wanting to say we're the best unit, we're the best team, we're the best this. So it's like, I think that your ego for wrestling and for jiu-jitsu and for fighting is going to be the first thing that's going to get you in trouble.
I completely agree with that. I just wanted you to hear that from a wrestler side, Corey, because I've always tried to tell you, they always try to tell you that those rings are a trampoline or whatever the bullshit you used to hear. I just needed you to know that it wasn't that way.
No, it's the same like for like, and like the trampoline thing is like because back in the day, like the rings used to have an actual spring underneath of it.
Yeah.
But if you've been in those rings fucking suck, dude. Like those rings are way, way worse than the rings that they have nowadays, which is all this like, like what the fuck would that be called? Like this like free fitting hooks and stuff. Nothing's nothing's bolted in. Nothing's like those rings are way nicer than these rings that were trampolines that you'd see like back in WWF and stuff like that. Because like CIW used to have like way back in the day when I first started, they had an old WWF ring that had a spring in it, and it was the absolute worst. Like it was awful to bump in. It was, I mean, dude, it might as well just like you're just like falling down on the actual ground. And the rings that you have now, they have a give to them. They're not great. It's definitely not the equivalent of like jumping around in your bed. It's going to suck. But then, like I said, I was talking about the fundamentals earlier. It's like the fundamentals of knowing how to fall, which you learn in jiu-jitsu and you learn in wrestling training. Once you know how to fall properly and disperse your weight properly, you build up a tolerance to those things. And then you also learn that when you're not committing to your bumps, when you're not committing to these things that are happening, like I said, if someone grabs you in the head and arm and they're about to judo throw the shit out of you, you know it's happening. So like you can't just be like, I don't want to take this. You know it's happening. So you have to shift your weight. You have to put a hip down. You have to throw out your arms, disperse your weight. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You have to do it, or you could end up knocking the wind out of you. You can end up knocking yourself out. And it's the same thing for wrestling. You see it so many times. Guys, they're about to take a power bomb, regardless if they want to or not. They're about to take it, and then they do like this thing or like a reach back, and then next thing you know, their shoulders dislocated, their elbows dislocated, they bang their kidneys, they can't breathe, and either that will cost them to lose the match, or it's going to cost them to be hurt and be an asshole. And then also, you make the other guy look like shit, because if the power bomb is just finished, you just made his move look like absolute trash. So it's like it goes both ways of like pro wrestling and also just real life. Like you're gonna get real life hurt because you're stupid, and also you're gonna make the guy who may have drove 12 hours to see you wrestle. You might just the only highlight he may have had for that match, you just took it away by bumping like a shithead.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier with like the Army combatants training and stuff like that. I mean, there's a reason why they teach the defensive end, as you would consider like the fundamentals, like you were saying earlier. Like, for instance, simple example, I've been trying to teach my oldest daughter how to skateboard during the whole quarantine and stuff like that. If you don't know how to fall, man, you'll end up hurt. You'll end up hurt. Like there's no, like you were saying, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Sometimes the board's going to go out from underneath you, but if you roll with it, and as long as you kind of allow momentum to take its course and don't try to fight against it too much, you usually end up all right. Well, like you said, you might end up with a twisted ankle or sprain a wrist or something. But
like he said, Corey, I mean, you usually know. The only time I ever had an armbar or anything of that sort where I got hurt, and I didn't even get seriously hurt. It was kind of one of those where it popped, like the bursa sac popped, but then I was good afterwards. Basically what happened was guy went for a triangle. I knew he was going for a triangle. So I picked him up kind of to try to shake him off me. As he shook, he went for an armbar. I went to stack him like you're supposed to. And as I went to stack him, he just quick flipped and went dick down and my elbow popped. And there wasn't time to tap because I went from okay when my arm was stacked to as soon as he flipped, my arm went from this to down quick. So, I mean, it can be a quick switch. But that brings up a good question wrestling-wise. So you mentioned earlier in the interview, how part of the basis for Death Red Army was, to kind of give back to some of the younger guys and things. With you being in the game as long as you have, and obviously we're in a situation right now that nobody's ever experienced with the pandemic and all that. You've gotten to wrestle on some of the shows that have come back. I'm with Horror Slam, I believe. And, so what are your thoughts it's going to be like for indie wrestling, when things get to whatever the new normal is going to look like for wrestling?
Well, I've been at a couple of shows. I haven't wrestled at a couple of shows. So
Okay. Okay.
which we'll end up talking about later when we talk about my son.
Yes, sir.
But I've been at the shows that they did the benefits for my son, and then I've been in a couple of shows just supporting. If you see like GCW, if you follow like a lot of indie wrestling, you see GCW has found a way to make it still good, and make it entertaining, finding good venues that look good on camera. Because I think that being outside, that's the biggest issue that people are running into is like it's in Horror Slam, and I will be in debt to Horror Slam for the rest of my life for the things that they've done for me, for my son. But the biggest problem that you have is the same things that Horror Slam has faced, and same as all companies have faced. I think MCPW Chainsaw has done a relatively good job coming up with like their movie theater gimmick, like the drive-in gimmick. Because I think that's happened like a cool thing. But even like a couple nights ago, I think it was Saturday, GCW did their show at the Pier, and it looked phenomenal. Like it looked exactly how you'd want a wrestling show to look if it was outside. And very similar to like how UFC advertised like their wrestling in Dubai, like the Fight Island. And obviously it's not on the island and outside because that'd be, although it would look really cool, that's absolutely ridiculous. It would be, it felt similar to that. And GCW has done it before, or maybe no, Beyond had done it prior, where they wrestled on the beach, and it looked awesome. Like you could see like the lake or the ocean in the background, and it felt amazing. And that's what GCW did too, because this past Saturday is that from one angle you've seen the pier, and then from the other angle you've seen out into the water. And I feel like GCW, as they always have over the past couple of years, they've found a way and they found their niche to adapt and then overcome what they're dealing with. But that's not going to be the same for every other company, because not everyone's going to have that ability. Not everyone's going to be able to have the money to pay for that type of venue. And also, not everyone's going to be in the appropriate area to be able to do something similar to that. I hope, we get to a point where I believe we'll go through like a second wave of shenanigans. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter, but where we're going to re-shut down everything again, and then it's going to be shenanigans. Like I was saying, it's going to be all bullshit, good or bad. Like I said, that's something like I care to get into. But like, I feel like we'll shut down again. The same as like how and I seen a funny meme today, and where like the MLB made $18 billion last year with their season, and this season they couldn't figure out a way to go 4 games without having an outbreak of the coronavirus. So how is schools going to be able to open for 180 days and do the same? I thought that was a funny, like, it's funny, but it's also like, it's true. Did we lose it?
No, we still got you.
Okay, I said like it went to like the logo screen, so I was scared. But like I said, like regardless of like what I believe, or I don't even know what I believe because I've hardly done any research. I have a lot of shit going on in my regular day life to be doing fucking conspiracy theories on the goddamn internet about coronavirus. But I believe that what will happen is we're going to go through either like a similar shutdown where we're going to be in the same fuckery that we're in now, where we can't wrestle inside. We're going to have to find new avenues, or we're going to get back to a point where we can't do anything outside again, which will be very shitty. But also, as it gets colder, I don't care because I don't go outside when it's cold. So, but yeah, I think GCW has done a great job doing what they've done. And then everyone else, like I like like XI has done like house parties, Horror Slam has done like their secret shows. I like that. I wish the venues were better for camera, because that's what I think about the most is like, I think about like production. My brain always goes to production. And that's some heartburn. And that's what hurts me about like Horror Slam, and that's what hurts me about like the XI. And that's what GCW has found a niche for in this situation, because you want and the boys and girls like in the ring, like they're like the men and women wrestling. And also, if you're a promoter, you want the same thing. Like, you want to be able to market your shit. You want to be able to sell, like not necessarily sell, but you want to be able to sell your footage. You want your boys and you want their performers to be able to use your footage in their music videos, in their highlights, and all this stuff to be able to help market your business. And it's very hard to do that if you can't actually get quality video out of your stuff. And that was always like, out of everything that has to do with wrestling outside, that was always my biggest like faux pas. Is that I didn't like that, because then it's almost like useless footage. But also that's something that like guys like will just have to deal with, because there's no other way. So I'd rather wrestling continue outside in someone's backyard than not continue at all.
I totally can respect that. Here, and to go with that, you know, before we get to the other reason why we brought you to the show, so we've seen a lot of companies have had to shut down. Like, you know, you've seen Evolve got bought by WWE. Let's see, who are some of the other big ones that said they didn't know if they were going to be able to come back? Long story short, do you think that when all this starts back up, you're going to see like the rise of like the big super indies again? Or do you think it'll take a while before that's able to reestablish itself?
I think that everything will be back, maybe even a step above of what it was. Like wrestling, indie wrestling especially, was going so good when this happened. And it's not like it downturned and then fizzled out and went away. It was like a hard shutdown. So everyone who loves it wants it. So at least for the first like year or so, when it actually gets to come back in full force, I think you're gonna have like that same, and also like, let's say there's very, very small amount of companies that are running right now where the guy or gal, the promoter, is living off of that wrestling revenue to pay their bills at home. 99% of the promotions and indie promotions that we all love, they have real life jobs. So their company not running is probably saving them actual money in real life, because 99% of those promotions are hardly breaking even or losing money, and they're doing it for the love of the game. There are the major promotions that are making good money, but I would still say that person wakes up and goes to a 9 to 5. And I think there's 1% who doesn't. So I think that like there are some places that aren't going to be able to reopen, but I also think that same as how wrestlers retire, like they're going to Terry Funk and come back. Like Evolve, I think Evolve was eventually going to be bought by WWE no matter what. You know, the fact that WWE was putting them on the network, they were already had such a trust and working relationship that obviously they were using that as their territory, the same as NXT once was, but now NXT is a national brand that like now the guys who are in developmental aren't getting the opportunities to wrestle on NXT like they were when NXT first started, because now NXT is on TV. You can't have these fucking idiots be out here bouncing around the ring that know how to play the ropes. Now they have to learn that somewhere else. Where they're going to learn it, they're going to learn to Evolve now. And then the guys who are really good at Evolve, like Kurt Stallion and the other guys who are very sweet there, they're going to end up going into the NXT developmental, and then you'll see those guys on NXT killing it, and then it's just going to be the vicious cycle again, except for Evolve will be the original NXT. NXT will be what NXT is now, and then you'll see that as like their farm league or whatever.
That's exactly what I thought would happen, because you know, even out of the guys you mentioned, like you mentioned Kurt Stallion, he's past guest of the show. Austin Theory came from there. He's past guest of the show. I mean, these guys that have all went to WWE, Corey, if there's any way I can equate it to you, I've talked to you about it before, but it's kind of like an LFA for the UFC, right? LFA is like the number one feeder that you'll see them getting fights.
Triple A for baseball, same, farm league.
Like I said, a good 3 or 4 of the guys that we interviewed from Evolve ended up going up to WWE. Hell, Theory, 2 weeks after we interviewed him, he was on NXT TakeOver. So that gives you an idea to how closely WWE was watching. Not to mention a guy like Darby Allin, who, even though he fucking hates Evolve, he came from there before he went to AEW as well. So, I mean, that's good to know. And I kind of think the same thing as far as if they're going to, if they'll stay around. I think WWE always kind of has had a feeder thing, like even back in the day, like for those who, have been watching wrestling long enough, ECW was that for them back in the day, or like,
they had FCW, they had OVW. They
Deep
had
South.
all these places. Yeah. They had like those, Deep South, OVW, FCW was their original like farm league. And then those all kind of closed down as like the wrestling kind of took that downturn. And then they just kept FCW. OVW went on its own. And then Deep South completely closed. and or at least I think they did. I'm pretty sure they did.
Yeah, they're close.
And then FCW became NXT, and then NXT was just a small little thing, and then NXT became this huge thing that it is now. So they have to develop another system where they can learn the little things, because they hire guys who are really good indie wrestlers, but they got to bring them in and then teach them the way of the camera and teach them the way of working mass amounts of crowds instead of even 400 people. There's a completely different, like scheme of how you treat the crowd based on the size. And then you got to show them, like, it's like how to move for camera, how to do certain things, how to cut promos for a PG era, and also cut promos at WWE style. There's so many things that you can't do down in NXT because NXT is already on TV, so you can't bring guys in and bring them up that way. So you have to have a new way, and Evolve is obviously, it's been that for a minute, and it's going to be that way now, but just now, like, officially.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought when it happened. I mean, it sucked for guys like Chris Bonjour that we knew and stuff like that. Like, I don't know where he ends up out of this, but I mean, I just wanted to see what your take was on that. Well, let's get to the other part of why we brought you on. So I'm not gonna lie to you, dude. Full disclosure, as soon as I started to see the things about Wyatt Strong and all those things that were going on, it reaches out to me personally, because as you and I have gotten to talk about at BCWA and the few conversations we've gotten to have, I've dealt with health issues my whole life. I got Crohn's disease, I got cerebral palsy, and I've worked with kids with everything from Asperger's to Down syndrome and everything in between. So when I saw that, the whole thing was going down with Wyatt and all that, man, it just reached out to me, and I wanted to, give you a chance to kind of talk about it and let everybody kind of know what's been going on. So I'll let you say it. You know it better than I do. So let us know about Wyatt Strong and what exactly happened and how's everything right now.
Okay, so I mean, I'll start from the beginning. So it all started with Wyatt would say he had a headache, and when I say this happened very infrequently, I mean maybe twice a month at the absolute best. And he'd be like, I have a headache, and then he'd throw up. And it always happened in weird times. Like, we'd be outside playing, he'd be running around with the dogs, we'd be doing this, or he just ate like an entire row of cupcakes. He would say it, and it would always just like, oh yeah, like he just ate these, 2 pounds of sugar. That's why his stomach hurts, or that's why his head hurts. That's why he just threw up. And it always just kind of made sense. But then the last time it happened twice. And then where he said he had a headache was in the back of his head. And I was like, man, that doesn't make sense. So then my wife had called to get an appointment. And then essentially, I didn't think anything of it. Like, I was just like, okay, cool. He's going to go do that. And then, maybe, they'll say something and we'll just, maybe he's allergic to something. Maybe he's like how every single person and their mother is gluten intolerant nowadays. He'll be that. And I just thought it would be something. It was nothing. And me and my daughter were hanging out, and my wife and him are at the doctor, and essentially she calls in a panic and says that he has a tumor, and I stand in the hallway in the house, and I'm just like, there's no way. Like, it feels like a car crash. It feels like a dream. Like, it does, and I was like, no. And I was like, no. And then
did we lose him?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I got you. Yeah, I got your
Dave.
Did we
lose him?
No, you're coming in clear. I think Kyle, it might be your end.
Corey, are you there?
Yeah, everything's fine. I think it might be your end, Kyle.
Yes, I hear all of you guys.
Yeah. Kyle? Yeah, I think it's his end. Go ahead and continue with your story. I'm sure he'll jump back.
Okay, so then he gets the MRI done, and then from that point, they're just like, get down to the hospital now. And they start calling to the children's hospitals. They call to 2 different ones, and they basically are finding the best hospital that could get him in immediately. That's how severe they're treating it. So now I'm just like, dude, there's no way this is happening. And my wife is obviously and this will be a common thing that happens throughout the entire story. She's in a balls out panic, and she gets home. She's packing the bag. She's running around the house. He's standing there he's outside right at the moment, and he's just perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with him. And like the day prior, even the day prior, like the moments prior to him going to his appointment, we were outside playing on the trampoline. We went for a bike ride. We're doing all this fun stuff that like somebody with such a severe tumor shouldn't be able to do. And or what they say is such a severe tumor. So we get down to the hospital and they start explaining it to us. And they say like his tumor is bigger than a golf ball. So in a 6-year-old, that's like
that's essentially half their skull.
Yeah, it's like it's essentially like a fourth of his brain is this tumor. And the reason he's throwing up is because at times his brain is being blocked by the pressure. So he can't drain his brain fluid, and he can't drain it properly because of the swelling in his brain. And the people, like the nurses, are asking us like has there ever been a time where he's been able, like, not being able to talk? Is he ever slurring his words? Is he ever acting funny? We're like, no, he is 100% normal all the time. We're explaining to these, and they're like, I just can't believe that. And then they ask him to walk, and he like walks across the room normal, and then like Naruto runs back over and jumps up on the bed, and he's just acting totally normal. And he have to put a shunt in his head, which then like will drain the fluid out, which then will relieve the pressure from why he's getting headaches and stuff. And so he does that. On Thursday night they do that, and then on Friday night he goes in for a surgery. And this is where like I'll probably get emotional, but like because this is where it gets scary. Granted, it's scary no matter what. If you're a parent, any surgery you're anybody's gonna get, your friend, your family, any of it's scary. So like they say, like best case scenario, he'll go in and he'll be out in 2 days. He'll still have to do radiation and stuff like that, but in 2 days he'll be back up and running. Everything's gonna be great. And we're like, okay, cool. Like, and I'm trying to stay positive. And me and him, he's in the waiting room about to go into surgery. And him and I are just chilling. We're hanging out. We're playing Roblox. And they come in. They're like, hey, bud, it's time to go in for your surgery. And like, we're like, okay, sweet. Like, let's go. And I'm like, dude, you're going to be all right. I'll see you. I'll see you in a couple hours and everything's going to be sweet. And they give him like a little bit like the laughing gas type stuff. And he just like looks up at me and he's like, Dad, I'm scared. And it made me sad then because there was nothing I could do for him.
Yep.
But then it made it even worse because he didn't wake up. So he comes out of surgery. They come tell us like, hey, everything went great. His surgery was great. No hiccups. They removed all the tumor. They removed more than they thought they were going to be able to. They were able to take it over. We're like, oh, hell yeah, this is amazing. This is amazing. They bring us into the room and he's still sleeping. They're like, oh, he'll wake up shortly. And they just kind of like leave us there with like a nurse sitting there. And the nurse is like hardly paying attention, which is also going to be a theme of this entire thing. And the nurse is like playing, like not playing, it's not like she's playing like fucking Minesweeper, but she's playing around on the computer. And we're sitting there, and then he starts breathing like a snoring noise. Like he's like almost like his like airways like restricted. And I'm like, man, that's not normal. And the reason I know it's not normal is because last year, 2019, in the beginning of the year, my dad died, and he died from he had a heart attack in 2018, which like left him like severely like brain damaged. And then he eventually went on to then have like an aneurysm that then made he like bled out and died, or like his brain like started bleeding, and then that's what killed him. And when they pronounced him brain dead, that's exactly the way he sounded. And then fast forward to the end of the year, the same exact thing happened to my grandma. She had a brain aneurysm that made her not be able to live on her own. And then I moved into the house to help take care of her because she was either going to have to go to rehab or like a rehab center, or like a nursing home, or someone was going to live with her. And I chose to live with her. Me and my family, we ended up moving into her house, and we started, like, I was there to take care of her. And then 2 days after Christmas, the same thing happened to her. She had a brain aneurysm and she died. And it was the same exact thing when the doctors came in and they told us, hey, she is brain dead. There's no coming back from this. She was breathing the exact same way. So I start like panicking immediately because I've seen this 2 times in the past year, 3 times in my entire life, of like I know something's wrong. And I'm telling the nurse, and like she's just like, they're like doing like the like rubbing the knuckles on his chest, like, oh, why? It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. And I'm like, no, this is not normal. And then like out of nowhere, like his blood pressure goes like through the roof. And then his heart rate starts going really high, and they don't know why. And they're like, oh, well, this isn't normal. This isn't normal. And then like she like fucking lollygags out the room to go find the doctors, and the doctors come in. They're like, oh shit. And they grab me and my wife and they put us like in a private room, which is scary as fuck, because if everything was okay, then we would just be out in the regular waiting room. Yeah. And we're not. We're in a room alone. So then we're freaking out even more. Like, dude, what the hell is going on? And like a half hour, 45 minutes past, they come back and they're like, hey, we got Wyatt stable. But we had to intubate him again because he's not able to breathe on his own. And so now he's back with a breathing tube again, and he's not waking up. He's like completely like out of it. And he was basically like in a coma for 3 weeks. And every time, like, so the first time they tried to take the tube out, he wasn't able to breathe on his own. And they had to put it immediately back in. And then like 2 weeks later, they tried, and he was able to breathe for like 20 seconds on his own, but then he stopped breathing again. They had to put it back in. And the last time, they were taking the tube out just to put a camera down there so they could see what was going on in his throat and see like if there was something, like a reason why, like is it because his vocal cords are swollen or something going on? So when they take the thing out and they put the camera down, everything looks great, and then he just keeps breathing on his own. And so they come grab us and they're like, hey, we don't know if it's going to last the whole night. If he does, that's great, but don't get your hopes up. But right now he's breathing completely on his own and everything's going great, but he's still not awake. And then everything goes great for like 2 or 3 days, and he eventually like opens his eyes. But now it's what they call like post posterior fossa syndrome. And it's essentially like the layman's term of like what they explained to us is like essentially like his brain is not wired together anymore, and it will take time for all like the synapses to connect back together. Like basically they said, like, you know, they have a golf ball and it was on his cerebellum, which is why he's having a really, really rough time. Like he can't walk, talk, eat, anything on his own. Is because like essentially like his brain got used to that tumor being there. So his brain was wired around this tumor. And now that tumor's gone and his brain's gone like haywire, and now it can't figure out how to reconnect itself. And they said that everything will be fine. He will get better. It could take years. It could take, or not years, but it could take weeks. It could take months. So now he's halfway through radiation now. To kind of cut through, and I got some good stories if we want for me to get mad and talk about how much I hate some nurses there. Most nurses were great, but if you want some silly stories, I got some silly stories where I almost had to go John Q on these guys. But right now, like as we sit now, they expect him to get better. He's doing radiation. We chose not to do chemo unless they came to me with a better reason for him to. Essentially, like, so I'll give you this story. Our oncologist sat us down, and she's saying like, hey, we told you that Wyatt wasn't going to have to do chemo. So Wyatt has a tumor, and it's only in kids, and it's relatively aggressive. And the type of tumor they said wouldn't require chemo, just radiation. We're like, oh, thank God. And then like 2 days after a surgery, like, oh, well, we might want to consider chemo because of this new study we found. And we're like, okay, sweet, like what's the study? And then she was like, well, it shows that like 14% of kids are like the chances of ever having another trauma or cancer related trauma happen again, it goes up 14% if he has chemo. And chemo is 88 days, and it's only 88 days if everything goes great. And if it doesn't go great, then he essentially has to start that 88 days over again every 22 days. So if he gets to day 21 and he has to take a 3-day break, he has to start all over again. If he's past day 22, then he will then have to, if he gets to day 43 and something goes wrong, he has to start at day 23 over again, and all the way up to 88 days.
Right.
And what we've been sold it's almost like we've been sold a bill of goods, but not because, like I said, most of these people are great, but it's almost like they've always pitched us like the best case scenario, and everything that has happened has been like the opposite scale of like he's going to wake up in 2 days. Well, actually, he didn't wake up for a month. And he ended up having kidney stones. He's ended up having to do like all this crazy stuff that like we've never were told was going to happen. And the lady sitting there pitching us these numbers, like, well, it's 14% better. And I was like, yeah, bitch, but 14% of what, dude? Like 14% of like, is it 3% to 17%? Like, what kind of thing are you selling us? And essentially she breaks it down. She's like, well, it's a little bit better than 1 out of every 10 kids. The chemo, 88 days of chemo helps. And I was just like, there's no fucking way that 1 out of 10 kids is I'm putting my kids through. Like, I'm not going to put Wyatt through that for less than 2 children. Yeah. And what made me choose to not do it, or at least not do it for now, until they come with a better numbers for me. I'm a numbers guy, is she said that it held 1.4 kids, and I was like, "There's no such thing as 1.4 kids. Like, there's 1 kid and there's 2 kids. You don't get to have partial kids." And I was like, and then I asked her,
it helped his bottom half.
Yeah, and I was like, do you have kids? And she was like, no. And I was like, that's why you'll never fucking understand. That's why you can come in here and tell me, hey, we have to have this thing, we have to do this chemo, but you have no idea what you're putting this person through, because you're only looking at it from a physician's standpoint, not from, they're not even real kids to you. They were 1.4 kids. Like, that shit's not real to me. So then we chose no on that. And now for him, basically, it's just finishing his radiation and then learning all of his,
skills.
Yeah. And just getting his strength, his muscle back, and then learning talk, walk, and all that jazz. And like I said, we're hopeful that it's in the next couple of months that everything just kind of clicks. We've heard a couple like really like inspirational stories where it's just, they took a little girl to a zoo, and the little girl seen a lion, and the lion roaring, and then her trying to roar back at the lion, like reconnected those synapses somehow just by Jesus magic. I don't know, whatever it is. And it's shit like that. So we're like, hopefully like someday something's going to happen where everything just clicks back on and we're back in the game. And then he'll just have to, from there, then it's just like maintaining making sure he's having his MRIs done monthly and making sure that shit never comes back. And then hoping and praying that we never have to deal with it again.
So I know it doesn't console the situation any, but I can relate in a little bit to the way that it was relayed to you why they need to do radiation. So when I was 19, I had stomach surgery. They took out my appendix, they took out 6 inches of my small bowel, and they took my ileocecal valve out. I was training, ironically, for a jiu-jitsu tournament. I thought it was just a flare-up because of my Crohn's. Now you'll be able to appreciate this as a parent, right? So my dad just died in February, but at the time, obviously, both of them were still around. So I got sick. I thought, whatever, dude, it is what it is, whatever. It's just a flare-up. So I kept training. Go to the doctor. They go, yeah, we need you to get a CAT scan and MRI and a couple other things just to make sure everything's okay. But they couldn't get me until the next day. Guy calls me about 10 o'clock at night and goes, I never got your EKG or any of that back. I said, well, that's because they said they couldn't do it till tomorrow. She's like, no, you need to go right now, blah, 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 blah. So I sat there overnight for 24 hours, maybe 5 minutes. I'm exaggerating because that's what it felt like to me.
Right.
But my parents had just left. Like, I shit you not, it couldn't have been more than an hour. This guy comes in with a Post-it note. I shit you not, a Post-it note of what my stomach is supposed to look like. Now, we'd been only talking about steroids the whole time. And fucking, he comes in, he goes, yeah, I need you to sign this. We're going to cut this, and this out. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm 19 years old and I'm like shitting bricks over here. And I had one of the worst hospital experiences in my life, because after the surgery, I had the same kind of moment like Wyatt did, where he told you he was scared. Because I told my mom, I was like, I don't know what the fuck they're going to do. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. I wake up from the surgery, they got to stand you up to get your insides moving and things. Well, I told the lady, don't stand me up. Don't stand me up. I'm telling you, I'm still out of it. Sure as shit. Passed straight back out, shook around, had a seizure. Yeah, man, it was
God damn.
It was insane. So I totally could relate. So we're getting the go home cue from the studio here. So to close, man, I know Wyatt's moving around. I seen he's been trying to run you over with the walker. I thought that's what I saw on Facebook.
Pretty much, yeah.
So tell me now, as you guys move forward, I mean, I know this gives you a whole new drive for wrestling. I mean, what's next for you and the family, and how does this kind of fuel your ascent back to wrestling once this all clears out?
Well, that's actually a really good segue, and we didn't even plan it, which is it's okay. So right now we're sitting in what's going to be called the War Room, and you can't really get a good look at it, but me and the boys, the DTA boys, we built a studio in my basement. And essentially everything that's going to happen from August 1st and then on out is going to be myself. There's Christopher Saint. There's Jack Price over there. On patreon.com/Death Threat Army, you're going to be able to find 3 original shows. Toilet Bowl Wrestling, which I used to do alone, will be with the boys now. There will be Whiskey Watching Wrestling, where we sit down, we drink whiskey, we watch our favorite matches that we've been in, that other people have been in, our favorite matches from history. There will also be a podcast that will be being released, as well as more and more original content. And like I said, all that's going to be at patreon.com/Death Threat Army, and also deaththreatarmy.com, which will have all that same information, and it also have all the boys' booking information and everything like that on it. And there'll be tons of other stuff, and also other really cool perks and stuff of being a member of our Patreon. We'll have different tiers as Patreon works, obviously. There's a $5 tier just to watch the shows and stuff like that, a $10 tier, and then like a Becoming the Soldier of the Death Threat Army tier, which you get to be a guest on our show, similar to how this is happening right now. And that's all going to happen. We spent the past 3 days now building this set, which is hard to see, and it's not done yet. It's actually just kind of half-assed set up right now. You can see the boys over there looking stupid. Well, Brandon is. Jack Price, a handsome man. And we have a couple more things that have to be done. The lights have to be installed for the studio, but this is where everything's going to be happening for Death Threat Army while we're not able to wrestle. Because for me, I had made a not that I believe in the devil, but I had made a deal with the devil, essentially, that I was not going to wrestle until Wyatt was better. I said that if Wyatt would get better, then I will be back to wrestling. I will start wrestling again. But until he's at least out of the water, out of the woods with the situation that he's in right now, I'm going to not that the wrestling even takes me that far away from him, especially now with everything going on. It was more of like, if I don't know how to play. I will sell my soul to the wrestling version of Davy Jones' Locker if they make Wyatt okay. That's the shenanigans I said to myself when he started breathing on his own after 3 times of being intubated. And this is a product of that. The studio is a product of that. All the money and all the work and all the shit that we put in to make this studio, that is all the product of not taking this shit for granted anymore.
I hear you, brother, man. I love
that's
that.
what it is.
Like I said, dude, I'm definitely going to have to bring you back because there's so many things I wanted to talk about, because I know that thing started as your road to re-enlistment. But like I said, they're wrapping us up. So before I get out of here, is there anywhere anybody can donate to the Wyatt Strong thing still? And let them know where they can find you on social media, as well as the Death Threat Army.
All right, so the easiest way to find Wyatt's GoFundMe is to go to my Instagram. The link is in my bio.
Or in the link.
After this, I'll send you the link. On YouTube. Yeah, so I'll make sure you have the link for you guys. For myself and for the boys, obviously at Death Threat Army on all social media, at DT Aaron Orion, Instagram, Aaron Orion everywhere else. And like I said, the biggest thing is the patreon.com/Death Threat Army launches. DeathThreatArmy.com launches August 1st.
We'll have that up on our social media as well.
All that kind of bullshit. It'll all be there. August 1st.
Hey, man, like I said, make sure you're following us at KO3C Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You'll see all of that stuff along with this great episode on YouTube if you're not watching us live. Man, I just want to thank you for your time. And like I said, dude, you and your family are in my prayers. If there's anything I can do personally to help you guys out, please let me know. I definitely will have the GoFundMe in the link, and I've already personally donated myself. So like I said, man, best of luck to you and the family, and we'll definitely have to do this again soon.
Oh yeah, guys. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you guys later.
No problem, man. Thank you, brother.